All right, so today we're diving deep into self-improvement and meaning in life.
Sounds intense.
It is, right? I mean, you sent me this YouTube video, this conversation between Jordan Peterson and Jocko Willink.
Oh, yeah.
And man, talk about food for thought. We've got Peterson, the clinical psychologist, and Willink, former Navy SEAL.
Interesting combo.
Totally. And they're both, in their own ways, talking about how to live a more fulfilling life.
I see where this is going.
So one of the things that really struck me was Peterson's idea about, like, cleaning your room.
Clean your room.
Yeah, but it's not really about cleaning, right? It's deeper than that.
I think I know what you mean.
It's about those small changes, the micro improvements that can have a ripple effect.
I like that micro improvements.
And it made me think about Willink's military background, like in the SEALs, isn't mastering the fundamentals like critical?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like Peterson's saying we can apply that same principle to our own lives. Okay, another thing Peterson said that just blew my mind. If you're not speaking the truth, who is it that's talking?
Whoa, that's deep.
Right. It makes you wonder, like, how often are we just puppets? What do you think?
Well, he's definitely challenging us to be more authentic,
They can real? Yeah.
to align our words with our beliefs and actions.
Break free from those expectations, right?
Exactly. It's about embracing genuine self-expression.
And then they get into talking about Shakespeare. I was surprised to hear Willink, the tough-as-nails SEAL, found Shakespeare incredibly helpful, of all things.
Really?
Yeah, he said analyzing Shakespeare's complex language actually helped him decipher legal documents in the SEALs.
Interesting.
I know, right?
It just goes to show you never know what skills might come in handy.
So true. And it highlights the importance of being articulate, which Peterson calls a weapon.
A weapon, huh?
Yeah. The ability to communicate clearly and persuasively can be a total game changer in any field, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure.
But how do we get better at it? Well, Peterson suggests learning to write.
Right.
He says writing forces us to organize our thoughts, to refine our ideas.
That makes sense.
Then Peterson goes on to connect discipline and freedom. He argues that the discipline required to master a skill, like playing piano, actually leads to greater freedom.
That's interesting because you'd think it would be the opposite.
I know, right? But the more disciplined you are, the more freedom you unlock.
Like you're free to do more because you've mastered the basics.
Exactly. It's like learning a new language. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
I like that.
And all of this leads to the core message: finding meaning in life.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Peterson argues against a life of meaningless pleasure,
He's pushing us to strive for something more.
something with purpose.
Exactly. Something that gives our actions weight.
So think about your own life for a second. What gives you a sense of meaning?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
To really reflect on, right? And Peterson uses this powerful analogy, choosing between a life on the beach, just indulging in fleeting pleasures, versus a life where you're actively engaged in meaningful pursuits, even if it involves hardship.
I see the contrast.
And he captures this beautifully with the metaphor of walking uphill.
Walking uphill.
Yeah, he's saying life isn't meant to be easy.
There will be challenges.
It's a constant climb. But the journey itself, that's where we grow, learn, and find meaning.
I like that visual. That idea of walking uphill.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how Peterson and Willink both emphasize this, embracing discomfort.
Oh, totally. Like getting outside your comfort zone.
Right, because that's where real growth happens.
It's that whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger thing.
Right, exactly. But they're talking about more than just physical toughness.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Peterson talks about mental and emotional resilience, too.
Like facing your fears head on.
Yeah, he even frames it as like a moral obligation.
Wow, a moral obligation.
To ourselves and to the world to, reach our full potential.
And Willink, coming from the SEALs, he gets this.
Oh, absolutely.
He talks about voluntary hardship, intentionally seeking out challenges.
To build resilience.
Like training for a marathon.
Exactly. It's hard, but you come out stronger in the end.
So this idea of discomfort and pushing boundaries, it connects to another key point they both make: truth-telling.
Being authentic.
Right, and Peterson argues that living authentically means speaking the truth, even when it's difficult.
No matter what.
He uses that powerful analogy of the puppet.
Oh, yeah. Who's pulling your strings?
Exactly. Like, if we're not careful, we end up living lives dictated by other people's expectations.
Living someone else's story.
Have you ever felt that pressure, like, to conform, even if it goes against what you really believe?
Ugh, all the time.
It's tough, right? But Peterson's saying true freedom comes from aligning our actions with our values.
Even if it means going against the grain.
And Willink, he echoes this too.
Of course, with his background.
He emphasizes integrity and honesty, both personally and professionally.
He is big on that.
He draws a parallel between the battlefield and everyday life.
Interesting.
He says integrity is crucial in the boardroom, in our relationships, just like in combat.
It's about being someone people can rely on.
Someone true to their word.
Which makes me think about how hard it can be to navigate the world today.
With all the information overload.
Yeah, and competing narratives.
It feels like you're constantly being pulled in different directions.
So it's more important than ever to think critically, to question everything.
And seek out different perspectives.
Absolutely. We can't just passively absorb everything we see and hear.
That takes us back to Peterson's point about reading and learning.
Engaging with challenging ideas.
Right, like think about a book that really challenged your worldview.
Made you question things.
How did it change your perspective?
It's powerful stuff.
He and Willink both emphasize that knowledge is power.
But it's not just about facts.
It's about developing that ability to think critically, to analyze information.
And form your own opinions.
Exactly. We should be lifelong learners, always pushing ourselves.
Constantly evolving.
And it's about personal growth, too.
Becoming more self-aware.
Peterson talks about understanding our strengths and weaknesses and always striving to improve.
It's a journey.
He uses this phrase, making friends with the shadow.
What does that even mean?
It's about confronting the darker parts of ourselves, the stuff we usually try to hide.
Oh, I see.
We all have flaws, but instead of denying them, we need to acknowledge them, integrate them.
To become more whole.
Exactly. And Willink adds that perspective of discipline and resilience.
He's all about that.
He says, discipline equals freedom.
Now that's a paradox.
I know, right? But when you think about it, it makes sense.
Go on.
By setting high standards for ourselves, holding ourselves accountable, we actually unlock more freedom.
We become masters of our own destiny.
Exactly. It's about building that mental toughness that helps us persevere when things get tough.
Because challenges are inevitable.
But we have a choice in how we respond to them.
That's empowering.
What really struck me was their shared emphasis on meaning and purpose.
It's not just about success in the traditional sense.
It's about finding something that gives our life significance.
Something bigger than ourselves.
Peterson talks about a horizon of ever-expanding possibility.
I love that.
It's inspiring, right?
Totally.
And that brings us back to the metaphor of walking uphill.
Embracing the journey.
Knowing that it's in the striving, in the struggle that we find fulfillment.
But they also talk about finding our tribe,
Oh yeah, the people who get us.
People who share our values and support our journey.
They acknowledge that we can't do it alone.
We need community.
Willink compares it to his time in the SEAL teams.
Oh, interesting.
He talks about the importance of camaraderie, teamwork.
Like relying on each other for survival.
Exactly. And he says that same principle applies to life in general.
Makes sense.
We all need people we can count on.
People who have our backs.
So what are some qualities you look for in the people you surround yourself with?
That's a good question.
The people you choose to let into your life, it matters, right?
For sure. I think it's about finding people who share your values, who inspire you.
And challenge you to be better.
Absolutely. And being that kind of person for others, too.
It's a two-way street.
Peterson and Willink also emphasize that growth is ongoing. It never stops.
It's a constant evolution.
We should always be challenging ourselves, seeking new experiences,
Expanding our horizons.
and being open to new ideas. Never stop learning.
But as we're learning and growing, we need to remember self-compassion.
Being kind to ourselves.
It's not about beating ourselves up when we make mistakes.
We're all works in progress, right?
Exactly. Have you ever been too hard on yourself when you didn't meet a goal or something?
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's easy to get caught up in that negative self-talk,
But we need to acknowledge our efforts, celebrate our successes.
no matter how small.
It's all part of the process.
As we're having this conversation, I keep thinking back to Peterson's question. If your life were a book, would it be a captivating story or a dull, predictable one?
That's a powerful question.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It challenges us to examine our choices, make sure they're aligned with the story we want to tell with our lives.
We're the authors.
We have the pen in our hand.
We have the power to make it as compelling and meaningful as we choose.
And that choice is what Peterson and Willink are urging us to make.
To embrace responsibility, seek truth, pursue meaning.
Live lives of purpose and impact.
They're basically saying, go out there and write a story worth telling.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've been talking about all these ideas from Peterson and Willink about self-improvement and finding meaning and all that.
Yeah, lots to unpack.
But now, how do we actually put this stuff into practice?
Right, because it's one thing to talk about it, it's another to actually live it.
Totally. And both Peterson and Willink, they really emphasize taking action.
Like, just get started.
Peterson has this great line. He says, make a bad plan, make the best one you can, but don't get obsessive about it.
He's saying don't let planning become an excuse for inaction.
Exactly. Like, just start somewhere, even if it's not perfect.
Imperfect action is better than no action.
So true. What do you think holds people back from actually taking action?
Fear, probably.
Fair.
Yeah, fear of failure, fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
What will people think?
It can be paralyzing.
But Peterson reminds us, we're going to make mistakes along the way, and that's okay.
It's part of the process.
The key is to learn from them and keep moving forward.
And Willink, with his military background, he brings in that discipline aspect.
Oh, for sure.
He talks about setting clear goals, having a plan, and then having the discipline to actually follow through.
Like a military operation.
Right. Preparation, attention to detail, being adaptable when things change.
So it's this bias towards action
Just do it.
instead of overthinking everything.
So think about a goal you've been putting off.
Something you've been meaning to do.
What's one small step you can take today to actually get started?
Even a tiny step is progress.
It's a reminder that we have the power to create the life we want.
We just have to take that first step.
And as we're moving forward, it's helpful to remember we don't have to do it alone.
Find your people.
Peterson and Willink both talk about mentors and guides.
People who can support us on our journey.
Think about it. We can learn so much from people who've been there before.
Like reading books, listening to podcasts, having good conversations.
Those are all ways to gain wisdom and perspective.
But it's not just about absorbing information.
Right. It's about actually engaging with it, thinking critically.
Challenge your own beliefs, synthesize new knowledge, figure out what resonates with you.
That's where the real magic happens.
When you start applying these ideas, experimenting, seeing what works for you,
It's all about self-discovery,
becoming more intentional in your choices,
living in alignment with your values.
and embracing the challenges along the way.
Those setbacks, they're just opportunities for growth.
Exactly. It's all part of the journey.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
It's been quite a journey.
I'm feeling inspired by all this wisdom from Peterson and Willink.
They've given us a lot to think about.
But I also feel a sense of responsibility
Take action
to actually put these ideas into practice in our own lives.
to make a difference.
Remember Peterson's question. If your life were a book, would it be a captivating story or a dull, predictable one?
Let that question guide your choices.
Go out there and write a story worth telling.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.